So let's say you meet this individual that you um, have misinterpreted as somebody that's down in the pit that you resent,
Okay.
and you are unaware of the upsides, and you label them, you create a false causality that they're the cause of your misery,
Right.
and a false attribution bias that they're the real reason why you don't feel great or something, and you
Yep.
resent them. I ask the individual who's resenting, I do this every week in my breakthrough experience program, what specific trait, physical trait, action or inaction do you perceive that individual displaying or demonstrating that you despise, dislike, or hate most? And we narrow it down to a specific action, not a broad, vague generality and label. People will say abusive. And I say, no, that's a label. What's the actual action that they did? We narrow it down so we get precise.
Mm.
Because episodic memories in the brain are very precise things in space and time that are objective,
Yeah.
not nebulous interpretations that we make,
Right.
not abstractions that we make and generalizations, but really specific. Once we identify what specific trait, action, or inaction do you perceive this individual displaying or demonstrating that you dislike the most, and we define that clearly. We want to make sure there's no hearsay, there's no broad, vague generality labels, there's no how you felt, because that's how you felt, not what they did. Then we go to the next question. We ask, go to a moment where and when you perceive yourself displaying or demonstrating the same specific trait, action, inaction that you
Mm.
despised in them. And now let's make sure we're not judging them for things that we're doing, but we're overlooking. We're too proud to admit we do it. And we hold them accountable to look, because I've taken hundreds of thousands of people through this process, and we
Yeah.
haven't found a trait people judge that they didn't have in their life.
Yeah. It's like clockwork, right?
It was in, it's an old proverb. I mean, I believe in Romans 2:1 in biblical writings, it says, beware of judging, because what you judge is you. You
Yeah.
do the same thing.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I found that to be absolutely true. It's purely reflective.
It's
But
like this
people are
idea of
deflected.
I'm not what you say I am. You're what you say I am. Or really
Yeah,
both, right?
but you're both. So I learned that. I went to the Oxford Dictionary when I was about 30 years old or so, and I went through 4,628 individual traits. I literally went through the entire dictionary, underlined every possible human behavioral trait, and found, and then I thought, who is it that has the most extreme example of that behavior that I know of? And I wrote their name there. And then I looked at where and when did I display the trait until I could see that I'm equal to that.
Wow.
And I found that by owning all those traits and realizing nothing's missing in me,
Yeah.
I realized there's nothing to get rid of. There's nothing I need to seek. I have it all.
Yeah.
And instead of me reacting to people on the outside, I just see a part of myself.
You relate.
And if I love that side, I don't have a reaction to them. They don't run my life.
Yeah. Right.
So that's a preemptive strike by being aware and fully conscious of your own self before you react to other people. Because many
Wow.
people are too proud or too humble to admit what they see in others inside themselves and have deflective awareness and disempower themselves and then
Yeah.
become victims of their outside world.
Yeah.
So I hold them there. Then the third question, and I make them identify where it was, when it was, who they did it to, and who perceived them doing it until the quantity and quality is equal. Once that's equal, they're humbled because they realize, my God, I've been judging this person, but the reality is that they're reminding me of a thing I'm feeling ashamed of and too proud to admit it and dissociated from my shame, putting on a pride facade to try to avoid having to face what they're bringing to me. And they're bringing it out of me. And they're my teacher, making me aware of what I'm not loving in myself.
Right.
Then I ask the next question, because many things we have in our life that we experience that we think are terrible, traumatic, a day, a week, a month, a year, or 5 years later, we can come to the realization that it was a catalyst in a new trajectory and that we're now grateful for it. So why have the wisdom of the ages with the aging process? Why not have the wisdom of the ages without it by asking, what are the upsides now? We're just not seeing it. Trauma is not what happens to us. Trauma is what we make things, we make out of things that are neutral because we only saw the downsides to it.
Right.
So I basically go in there and I said, now go to a moment where and when you perceive this individual displaying or demonstrating that specific trait actually you despise most. Go to that moment and go actually into the moment of perception. And in that moment of perception, how did it benefit you? How did it serve you? How is it an advantage to you to experience that event, that trait?
Mm-hmm.
And at first they go, well, it didn't. I said, no. You
Mm-hmm.
answered that within 1.5 seconds, which means you really didn't look very hard and you're willing to play the victim. And you're getting sympathy from that. And so you're feeding off the sympathy from people instead of actually being accountable for your own reality. So I said, so what's the benefit of that? And they start uncovering the benefits. Well, it catalyzed my independence, and I became an entrepreneur, and I didn't depend on my dad, and I ended up deciding I was going to move, and I now am a global person, and now I own my own company, and I found the wife of my dreams, and and they start to see these correlations, and they go, I never thanked my dad.
Yeah.
And they come to a realization that there were just as many benefits and drawbacks, and that was not a trauma after all. It was a trauma labeled by them because they never saw the upsides. Then I go back to the moments when they did it and find out how did it benefit the people they did it to. Because as long as they're ashamed, they're assuming that what they did had a negative without a positive to them. And they go and discover the benefits to them and liberate themselves from the shame, and now no longer have emotional reactions to people that remind them of that part. Then I go and I do the next question. Go to a moment where and when you perceive the same individual displaying exactly the opposite behavior, because there's no one-sided person.
Right.
I'm not a nice person. I'm not a mean person.
Right.
I'm an individual with a set of values. If you support my values, I'm nice as a pussycat. You challenge my values, I can be mean as a tiger. If I go to an airline and I check in and they say, well, Dr. Demartini, we've upgraded you. You have a first class lounge. You've got this and this and this. I go, oh, thank you so much. I'm
right.
If they say somehow, even though you have 2,000 million miles on our airline, somehow we've overlooked your thing and we don't have a flight for you. I don't go, oh,
Yeah, right. Thank you.
I say I want a Richard Branson at the front desk now.
Yeah, right. Totally.
So I can be tough as a tiger.
Yep.
So I'm not a label, nice,
Yep.
mean, narcissist, I'm just a human being with
Yep.
both sides. And people
Yep.
are trying to get rid of half of themselves and trying to be only one-sided and
Yep.
block the love for their total